Coming up, another episode of The Deep Dive, exploring radical ideas. A podcast produced by Bob Rash.
That delivers a logical analysis of objective reality, grounded in rational principles. We will explore relevant facts and radical ideas based on the axiomatic principles of identity, causality, and consciousness, on reason as an absolute, on rational self-interest as a moral guide, and on the ideals of privacy, freedom, and justice.
When you think about immigration, I bet the first things that pop into your head are, physical things, walls, passports, maybe the journey itself.
Yeah, the logistics.
Yeah.
It's all about getting from point A to point B, physically crossing a border. That's what dominates the news.
Exactly. We focus almost entirely on that geographical move. But what if that's actually the least important part?
Well, that's a pretty challenging thought. If it's not about the physical move, then what is it about?
That's what we're diving into today. We're looking at this idea that the real journey isn't geographical, it's philosophical, it's moral, a psychological contract almost.
Okay, so our mission today is to really get into Roberto Rachewsky's essay from Substack. It's called The Moral Contract of Immigration, The Frontier of the Mind and the American Legacy. And it definitely challenges that standard view.
It really does. The core idea, the central assertion, is that migrating isn't just crossing land or sea, it's crossing a border in your mind, in your consciousness.
So the essay argues it's both material and moral. You have to physically move, sure, but you also have to, abandon the mindset that maybe contributed to the problems you left behind.
And consciously choose a new set of values, the values that, according to the essay, make the destination successful.
And this shift, this change in perspective is really key for you, the listener. If we take this on board, the whole conversation changes. It's not just about managing arrivals anymore.
Right. It becomes about value systems. We stop asking only where people are going.
And start asking what ideas, what principles are they seeking, what are they willing to adopt, and maybe even more importantly, what mental baggage are they prepared to leave behind.
It completely reframes how we think about national identity, societal health, resilience. It turns policy debates into something much deeper, philosophical, really.
So let's unpack that first big idea. Immigration is a kind of moral judgment.
Yeah, the essay suggests that when someone makes that huge decision to leave their home country, often a really traumatic choice.
Risking everything.
That choice itself contains an unspoken confession. A statement about the place they're leaving.
It's a powerful concept. If you're leaving behind your language, your culture, your family maybe, to go somewhere unknown, you're implicitly saying, that place I'm going to, it is something vital that my home lacks.
Or maybe something that home actively suppresses. Virtues, stability, opportunity. Something fundamental.
So the act itself becomes this declaration, this moral judgment. It's like saying, even if you don't say it out loud, this new place, its way of life, aligns better with how I believe life should be lived.
Which means the authentic immigrant, in this view, isn't just chasing a paycheck. They're actually affirming the merit of the destination, its laws, its structure.
And they're actively seeking to become part of that moral order, not just live beside it, but integrate into it.
And that affirmation, that choice, leads to what the essay calls the tacit pact.
Right, this unspoken agreement that comes with migration, at least migration that's intended to be permanent.
And the core of this pact.
Adjustment. But Rachewsky is really specific here. This isn't about, just submitting or erasing who you are. It's framed as profound respect for the new environment.
Okay, but what does that respect look like in practice? It sounds like it's more than just following the rules, paying taxes.
Oh, definitely. It's about recognizing why the host society works, why it prospered. You can't just show up and enjoy the benefits, the stability, the wealth, while rejecting the engine that created them.
The philosophical core.
Exactly. And the essay identifies those key values as liberty, responsibility, merit, and reason. These are the pillars holding up the prosperity.
So there's a logic to it then. If you came seeking freedom, you have to accept the responsibility part that goes with it.
Precisely. If you were drawn by the opportunity, you have to accept the principle of merit that underpins it. It's a package deal.
By choosing to live there, the immigrant logically has to accept these foundational principles. It's not just picking and choosing the bits you like.
Which makes integration something much deeper than just, say, learning the language or trying the food. It's about understanding the why. Why did this place flourish when maybe the place you left didn't?
It's an embrace of the moral structure.
Yes. It's not just learning the map of the city. It's about adopting the kind of moral DNA, the operating system, that built the city and allows it to function.
Okay, so if the foundation is these specific values, liberty, responsibility, merit, reason, this leads the essay into a pretty sharp critique.
A critique of what Rachewsky calls the modern advocates for open borders.
What's the core of that critique?
He argues they make a fundamental mistake. They confuse genuine freedom with the absence of limits, lawlessness, almost.
That seems like a really important distinction, equating no borders with freedom.
Yeah, and the essay draws a really clear line here between moving goods around and moving people.
Okay, how so?
Well, goods, computers, cars, bananas, they can circulate without carrying morality, right? They don't bring political systems or cultural resentments with them. They're just things.
But people aren't just things.
Exactly. People carry entire worldviews, values, expectations, histories. Trade is usually based on voluntary contracts, transactional stuff. But human society, living together, that needs shared values, mutual understanding of how we behave.
So their argument is you can't maintain a society based on certain principles if you just let any and all competing or even opposing principles walk in without discernment.
Right. The essay puts it very starkly. Hospitality without criteria turns into surrender. If your society is built on hard-won values like individual rights and reason, you can't logically remain that society if you welcome ideologies that actively seek to undermine or destroy those values.
That forces a whole different definition of freedom, then.
It does. Freedom in this essay isn't the absence of borders, it's the presence of principles.
That flips the usual argument on its head.
Completely. Borders, from this perspective, aren't there just to keep people out arbitrarily. They're there to protect the integrity of the specific value system inside those borders, the system that makes freedom possible.
So the border becomes much more significant. It's not just a line on a map. It's described as the civilizational line.
Yeah, it's the line where a society basically says, okay, within this boundary, reason, law, and merit are the rules of the game.
And defending that line isn't optional. The essay argues it's a moral duty.
Yes, exactly that. It's not hostility towards outsiders. It's a duty to preserve the very conditions that create freedom. Allowing chaos or despotism, even in the form of ideas, to just flow across that line unchecked is seen as a kind of societal self-betrayal.
Okay, so given that really strong stance on principles and borders, how does the essay then define the true immigrant? Who fits this model?
The true immigrant emerges from what the essay calls voluntary moral affinity. They choose the new place not just for money, but because its core principles resonate with them.
They accept the deal, basically, the whole package.
Right. They commit to living by the logic of freedom, which means opportunity and responsibility. It's a two-sided coin.
And their actions show this intent.
That's the idea. They're not showing up demanding privileges or special treatment. They're asking for a chance to prove their worth, to succeed based on merit.
So they seek recognition through their own efforts, not through, say, demanding redistribution based on group identity or past grievances.
Exactly. And even the standard integration steps, learning the language, the laws, the customs, the essay reframes this. It's not about surrendering your identity.
What is it then?
It's framed as liberating oneself. It's like proving, mainly to yourself, that your success depends on the values you adopt and practice, not on your bloodline or where you happen to be born. It's a conscious choice for personal growth, aligned with the new society's principles.
This framework of a moral contract gives a very clear line, or even a harsh one, for when immigration stops being beneficial, according to the essay.
It turns sour, Rachewsky argues, at the precise moment someone crosses the physical border. But mentally, they bring the exact same baggage, the dogmas, the resentments, the fatalism that contributed to the failure of the place they left.
And that's described as
Merely exported failure, a chilling phrase. You've moved your body to a place that works, but your mind, the source code of the failure, hasn't made the journey. It remains unchanged.
This leads us to probably the most loaded term in the whole piece, moral parasitism. That's a really strong accusation. How is it defined?
It is strong.
Yeah.
The essay uses it to describe the desire or the attempt to enjoy all the fruits of a free and prosperous society, the stability, the rule of law, the tolerance, the wealth, without actually buying into or contributing to the underlying causes, the principles that sustain it.
So wanting the benefits without the responsibilities, or without respecting the values that created those benefits.
Essentially, yes. It's wanting maximum benefit for minimum moral commitment or integration into the core value system.
And what are the consequences of this kind of dynamic, according to the essay? How does it lead to decay?
Well, if immigration happens without this frontier of the mind being crossed, the result isn't renewal for the host society, it's decay. It might be subtle at first, maybe increased strain on social systems without a corresponding contribution, maybe attempts to import legal or social norms that undermine the existing ones.
Or just a general erosion of trust and shared commitment to those core values like merit and individual responsibility.
Exactly. That's why the essay insists the true immigrant has to be like a reborn being. The physical move reflects an inner transformation towards reason, autonomy, individual responsibility.
So immigration done right is framed as this peak expression of rational individualism, someone actively choosing a better, more rational way of life.
Yes, but Rachewsky argues the modern West is currently caught in a dangerous paradox, confusing two very different roles,
Which are?
the guest and the invader. And he means invader in a moral or philosophical sense here.
Okay, that distinction sounds crucial. Let's break it down. The guest.
The guest is the person we've been describing as the true immigrant. They arrive with that moral affinity. They want to contribute, learn, respect the rules of the house, basically. They're seen as worthy of welcome, of honor, of integration.
And the flip side, the moral invader.
The moral invader arrives, maybe seeking the material benefits, but fundamentally seeks to remake the host society in the image of the place they abandoned. They resist adjusting their core beliefs, they might live as perpetual outsiders, and crucially, they often demand the host society compromise its core values to accommodate their imported ones.
So they act, perhaps unintentionally sometimes, but effectively as agents of dissolution, undermining the host's identity.
That's the argument. And refusing to adjust, especially when the host is providing the very stability and opportunity you sought, is framed as a deep insult to that tacit pact.
Right. The essay points out that migration naturally flows from less successful places to more successful ones, from chaos to order, despotism to freedom.
If that's the case, then logically, the newcomer's responsibility is to preserve the very things they came seeking, not to undermine or destroy them by dragging in the failures of their past.
Importing destructive ideologies into a free society is seen as inherently contradictory, maybe even aggressive.
Whether it's done consciously or not, the effect can be corrosive. This brings us back to that idea of hospitality. It's a virtue, absolutely. But the essay warns strongly against confusing hospitality with civilizational suicide.
You can be welcoming, you can offer help, without agreeing to abandon or apologize for the very values that made your society successful and attractive in the first place.
Exactly. It's about maintaining self-respect for the principles that created the prosperity being sought.
Okay, to make this less abstract, the essay uses a big historical contrast to show this moral contract in action, and also when it breaks down.
Right, it starts with what it presents as the positive example. U.S. immigration, particularly in the 18th and 19th centuries.
This is held up as the model, the shining example of the contract working.
Pretty much. Millions came across the Atlantic. But the key, according to the essay, is why they came and what they were fleeing. Mostly rigid European systems, authoritarian states, fixed social castes, state religions, lack of opportunity.
And crucially, what were they looking for? The essay emphasizes it wasn't a welfare state.
No, that basically didn't exist then. They were seeking a land of freedom, yes, but also one of responsibility and risk. They weren't primarily looking for safety nets. They were looking for a fair chance to make it or fail based on their own merits.
So the value exchange was clear. You leave behind hereditary privilege. You embrace individual merit. You leave behind reliance on fate or miracles. You embrace hard work and initiative.
And importantly, they arrived largely as admirers, not antagonists. They wanted to understand and become part of the American experiment, not tear it down and rebuild it like the places they'd fled.
They came seeing America as a place to create wealth, not demand a share of existing wealth, because they understood, or quickly learned, that wealth has to be created first.
Exactly. They internalized that principle.
Yeah.
So this wave of immigration, grounded in that shared understanding of merit, freedom, and responsibility, didn't weaken the U.S. The essay argues it was the powerhouse, the engine of its growth.
A fusion, it says, of the immigrants' productive mindset with the moral structure of American liberty and capitalism.
Okay, so that's the positive model presented. Now, contrast that sharply with the European experience, especially later, say, mid-20th century onwards.
Right. Here, the context is different. Waves of migrants coming often from societies shaped by very different principles, maybe theocratic absolutism, maybe strong tribal collectivism, often fleeing violence or stagnation, yes, but.
But, and this is the core of the critique, Rachewsky argues that while many fled the consequences, war, poverty, too few were willing or able to abandon the underlying ideas that caused those consequences.
They arrived physically in free, stable countries, but mentally, many remained, quote, impermeable to freedom.
They brought the body to enjoy the material benefits, but not the philosophical mind ready to adopt the principles that produce those benefits.
And this sets up what the essay calls not just a political problem, but a fundamental metaphysical conflict. That's a strong word. What does that mean here?
It means it's a clash at the deepest level, about the nature of reality, the purpose of life. How do you reconcile a civilization that, at its best, celebrates individual life, achievement, reason?
With cultures that might glorify collective submission, see suffering as virtuous, or even view death in service of dogma as the highest goal?
How do you harmonize honoring the creative individual with idolizing sacrifice for the group or a deity? The essay argues these are fundamentally opposed worldviews. You can't just blend them easily.
So this clash, it's not just different opinions. The essay insists these are irreconcilable systems because they start from opposite basic assumptions or axioms.
Right. They operate on totally different moral planes, different understandings of reality itself.
Can we break down that contrast a bit more? Because this is where the argument gets, well, very pointed.
On one side, you have the inheritance of the Enlightenment, the Western tradition at its core. Here, individual human life is presented as the highest value, non-negotiable. Reason is the tool for understanding the world and solving problems. Dignity resides in the individual.
Okay. And the opposing view presented.
A more mystical or collectivist vision, perhaps, where this earthly life might be seen as secondary, maybe a test, maybe just suffering, maybe unimportant compared to an afterlife or the collective. And death, particularly for a cause or a dogma, might be seen as the ultimate achievement or reward.
So where one system values individual rights and freedom of thought, the other might see that as dangerous selfishness or rebellion against necessary authority, whether divine or political.
Exactly. And where one values reason, science, questioning, the other might prioritize blind faith, adherence to dogma, unquestioning obedience. The essay basically says it's a conflict over what's fundamentally real and important.
And Rachewsky is really emphatic here. He argues that treating these two systems as morally equal, that's a denial of reality.
Yes, he basically says it's denying a hierarchy that exists in reality itself. For a civilization to survive and thrive, it has to assert that, yes, life is better than death. Reason is superior to dogma as a guide to action. Creation and productivity are better than destruction and parasitism. You have to be willing to make those judgments.
Which directly explains why the essay concludes that European multiculturalism, at least as it was practiced based on this idea of moral equivalence, was essentially flawed from the start.
Precisely. It started from what Rachewsky sees as a false premise, that all cultures are equally valid, equally beneficial, equally compatible.
But cultures aren't just window dressing, like different foods or music styles.
No, that's a critical misunderstanding, according to the essay. Cultures are deep, complex moral and institutional blueprints. They shape everything: how people behave, how they build institutions, whether their society succeeds or fails in the long run.
So a culture rooted in valuing life, reason, individual freedom that tends to produce science, prosperity, relative stability.
And conversely, a culture that teaches contempt for this life, maybe hatred for outsiders, glorification of martyrdom, that inevitably leads towards repression, conflict, ruin. The argument is they are structurally incompatible.
So trying to force them together, assuming they're equally good, isn't tolerance.
Rachewsky argues it's actually condemning the more successful life-affirming culture to be gradually eroded by the less successful life-denying one, because the latter often acts parasitically on the stability created by the former.
Which leads to a very clear, maybe uncomfortable conclusion about the moral duty of Western societies.
Yes. The duty, as presented, is not to tolerate the actively intolerant. That's seen as a perversion of tolerance. The real duty is to actively defend the specific fragile space where life, reason, and individual dignity can actually flourish.
Defending your own civilization isn't arrogance in this view.
No, it's presented as gratitude, as rational self-preservation. It's recognizing that freedom, reason, prosperity, these are rare achievements in history. They're not the default, and they can't survive if we treat them with indifference, especially when faced with ideologies that are morally certain and actively hostile to them.
So, wrapping this all together, the essay circles back to its main point. Immigration, ideally, should involve a kind of moral selection.
Yes, selecting for individuals who genuinely understand, appreciate, and commit to the core values of the host society: freedom, reason, responsibility, merit.
The true immigrant is defined by that conscious choice, that intent. They choose to live more fully, abandon old constraints, and carry that spark of productive civilization with them.
Their movement isn't just driven by desperation or economic need, but by an attraction to the ideals, the philosophy of the new place.
And the fundamental thesis, the big takeaway that reframes everything, this whole debate about borders isn't really about physical walls.
Although physical borders might be necessary tools, yeah. The real border, the crucial one, is invisible. It's the line dividing the rational mind from the irrational, the productive from the parasitic, the creator from the destroyer.
The essential frontier is consciousness. The rest is just geography.
Exactly. Where your mind is determines whether your move contributes to civilization or helps undermine it.
And when we understand immigration through that lens as this moral contract, it elevates the act, doesn't it? It becomes potentially one of humanity's highest expressions, the individual searching for the best way to live.
Absolutely. But the flip side is stark.
Yeah.
Without those guiding principles, without that mental border crossing, it risks becoming just chaotic movement, inertia. People fleeing failure only to potentially recreate it elsewhere because the underlying mindset hasn't changed.
The essay uses a very specific and very current example to drive this point home right at the end.
Yes, it mentions the argument concerning individuals leaving Gaza to attack Israel. Rachewsky uses this to argue that the physical distance between barbarism and civilization can be just a single step, but that step is entirely defined by the philosophy, the mindset of the person taking it. Geography is irrelevant compared to the state of mind.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive has really taken us on a journey. We started with the common view immigration as geography, logistics, passports.
And we ended up deep in philosophy, discussing axioms, moral contracts, the very definition of civilization. It's a complete rejection of the purely material view of human movement.
We've unpacked the idea of migration as a moral judgment, the concept of the tacit pact based on shared principles like liberty and responsibility.
And that critical distinction the essay makes between the guest who arrives to contribute and respect and the moral invader who seeks to undermine the host values.
So the ultimate question that Roberto Rachewsky's essay leaves us grappling with is, well, it's huge. Will the world be a collection of distinct civilizations, each trying to uphold its values, particularly those celebrating life and reason?
Or will it become just this open, neutral territory where ideologies that fundamentally despise those values can spread unchecked, potentially overwhelming them?
It forces you, the listener, to think beyond the day-to-day politics and really define your own terms, because that frontier isn't just out there on a map, it's internal too.
And the essay leaves us with this final, powerful thought to mull over. What separates civilization from barbarism is the human capacity to choose good over evil, and crucially, possessing the wisdom and the courage to define and choose what is good and what is evil.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Deep Dive, exploring radical ideas, grounded in reality, driven by reason, built on self-esteem, rational self-interest, and laissez-faire capitalism, produced by Bob Rash.
We'll be back.